Good day everyone. We are the Group 5 and we will discuss the differences between international trade and internal trade. From our previous lessons, internal trade or domestic trade was defined as a main transaction taking place within the boundaries of a country, whereas the international trade are across the border having exchanges between two or more countries. In this lesson, we will see how this key aspect describe the approaches of a certain company or corporation in dealing with trade.
Heterogeneous groups. Heterogeneous groups include a mixture of races, genders, cultures, and ages that provides a wider range of life experiences and opinions. Internal trade versus international trade. Internal trade is the trading among the same group of people in a country, while international trade is the trade between countries take place between differently coherent groups.
So now let's proceed to political differences. Internal trade. It occurs within the same political unit. It is not restricted by the government except on a few goods. While in international trade, it occurs between different political units. The government in each country is keen about the welfare of its own nationals against that of the people of other countries. Hence, in international trade policy, each government tries to see its own interests at the cost of the other country. This trade is strictly monitored by the government and prior approval is required before international transactions.
Different rules of internal trade and international trade. There is no trade restriction for internal trade, while in international trade, there is a different restriction as the two countries involved in trade have different policies with regards to trade, and one of its example is the tariffs. Tariffs is a requirement of an imported product that will enter to other countries. Also, one example of different rules related to Samsung Company is the Japanese government strengthened regulation on the South Korea of high-tech chemicals used in semiconductor and smartphone production. Under the new rules, Japanese companies have to apply for approval for each contract to export specific materials to South Korean clients, including Samsung Electronic Company.
Different currencies in the internal trade. Each country has a different currency that is a different type of money which is acceptable only within its own frontier. In internal trade, their national currency is being used, while for the international trade, another notable feature of it is that it involves the use of different types of currencies. So each country has its own policy in regard to exchange rates and foreign exchange. They use currency they have agreed to settle the transactions. But the most popular are the US dollar, the euro, and the yen. According to the International Monetary Fund, the US dollar is most popular. As of the fourth quarter of 2019, it makes up over 60% of all known central bank foreign exchange reserves. That makes it the de facto global currency even though it doesn't hold an official title. Since the end of World War II, the dollar has been the world's most important currency. It is the most commonly held reserve currency and the most widely used currency for international trade and other transactions around the world. The next closest reserve currency is the euro. It makes up 20% of known central bank foreign currency reserves.
Domestic marketing deals only with one set of consumers called the homogeneous markets, in which prospective buyers of products are uniform in nature, habits, needs, choices, and etc. Simply stated, its local markets are not that broad. There is one nation, same language, and one culture which distribution can be easier without the external barriers to hinder the communication in the market. It involves a relatively lower degree of risk factors, where the marketing types needed, such as campaigns and advertising, are lesser in capital investment due to limited scope of target markets. In terms of competition, we can see that internal trade had one set of competition, hence it may be one set due due to the heterogeneous product monopolistic in nature. Many other competitors may adopt their products that enter markets and leads in more competitive markets even though competition was within the country's boundary. Both markets needed research to develop appropriate marketing strategies. Domestic marketing enjoys a number of privileges like easy-to-access data, fewer communication barriers, deep knowledge about the consumer demand, where a small survey will prove helpful to know the market conditions. Heterogeneous market refers to the different set of qualities of preferences of potential consumers. It is a market situation where the prospective buyers of any product are not available in the homogeneous of their needs, habits, choices, nature, and etc. It consists of a broader market which has the ability to reach out more consumers. The risk in international trade is comparably high due to the large amounts of its capital investment, where it is exposed to an economic downturn. An economic downturn implies to the slowdown of economic activity in a country, which can affect the decrease of income that can result to a financial crisis. Another risk that can experience in international trade is the cultural risk, wherein a company struggles to operate because of differences in culture, language, customs, and other factors. Entering in international trade may find competition in crowded markets in other countries, but it may also compete less in others. If the business had a better market positioning, the disadvantage can become an opportunity. It requires an extensive research about the preferences, tastes, choices, behaviors, and the likes and dislikes of the consumers because it differs in every foreign market. The company must provide more time and effort in researching the foreign market because of the uncertain differences between countries.
Factor in mobility. In internal trade, according to Harrod, it thus follows that domestic trade consists largely of exchange of goods between producers who enjoy similar standards of life. The degree of immobility of factors of production like labor and capital, which is generally greater between countries than within a country. Whereas in international trade, consists of exchange of goods between producers enjoying wildly differing standards, international capital flows are prohibited or severely limited by different governments.
Samsung Group. Samsung Group is a South Korean company that is one of the world's largest producers of electronic devices. Samsung specializes in the production of a wide variety of consumer and industry electronics, including appliances, digital media devices, semiconductors, memory chips, and integrated systems. Samsung was established in the year 1938 by Lee Byung-chul after the Korean War. As an example, we use Samsung to show how they approach trading inside and outside the Korea.
Heterogeneous group examples: internal trade versus international trade. Internal trade: Samsung Galaxy S10 5G used only in Korea and US. 70% of world smartphones use DRAM created by Samsung. Samsung Medical Center Korean versions comes with LTE-A capabilities. There are bloatware pre-installed that is not usable outside of Korea. Samsung produced a separate model of Galaxy Tab S6 exclusively for the Korean market. Quad-core of the Korean version is substandard compared to the Snapdragon process of the international version, and the Korean Samsung phones were designed for the Korean telecommunications infrastructure. And the international trade are the US versions comes only with LTE capabilities. The US version is believed to be the authentic model. The US and other variants, they are designed to be used for the networks of countries. They were intended to be distributed. Samsung uses a Linux based on operating system called Tizen for smartphone distributed on the Indian market. Political differences: internal trade versus international trade. The political environment is favorable to Samsung operations. And international trade, Vietnam grants South Korean engineers an exception to be quarantined upon entering the country to be able to not slow down the production of Samsung in Vietnam. Samsung operates in market with benign political factors. Recently, it faced widely political headwinds in South Korea. The reason behind this problem is tension with North Korea. The political environment is unsubtle to this location. They are prone to frequent changes in governing structures. Samsung also faces political pressures in many Latin American and African countries. Due to the tension in Russia, Middle East, and Brazil, the government established different rules, like higher tax rate, increase in minimum wage, and stricter environmental standards. And last is South Korea faces uncertainty from Japan's restriction of exports of key materials for production amid diplomatic rows between two nations in responding to wartime forced labor. Next is heterogeneous world markets, internal trade versus international trade. In terms of risk involved in internal markets, it was much lesser compared to the international. The advertisement fee was much lesser due to the smaller range of target markets. The heterogeneous or what we call monopolistic products entering the homogeneous markets. For example, the Samsung phone that had unique identification and preferences. It was easier to deal with the market segmentation because the company is only dealing with the same culture, habits, needs, and etc. So they only need to produce a product in a place with the homogeneous or same preferences. There was no large barrier that can hinder in segmenting the product in not that broad markets. Next is the competition in the internal market is much smaller and lesser in comparison to the international. The Samsung phone, which is monopolistic in nature, widely used by a local people and had unique features competing with the other phone manufacturers. We can see that the other phones are substitutes only, one for affordable and one for with much luxurious price only rich people can obtain or afford. Another, the people that needed to analyze are smaller to enable gathered information that can reach the needs, taste, and preference of locals. And the international trade, the Samsung has been consistently among the leading brands of smartphone, which they held a share of 20 to 30% in the market share in the world. It can cater a wide range of consumers and expands its market since it operates internationally, which leads to the company profit maximization. However, entering the foreign market has some inconveniences because of different competitors that can reduce the share in the market. There are some features in the smartphone that differ because Samsung has different countries of productions for the suppliers of different consumers. It varies from one another country because it depends on the origin and the network providers. For example, Korean version with LTE A capabilities while US version have only LTE capabilities. It differs because Korea's internet speed is faster than the US. It has some changes due to the country's environment or condition. And last is the countries that considered Samsung as leading and top brand of smartphone are the countries of Pakistan, Australia, UAE, Malaysia, Brazil, Germany, and France. Next is different rules and different currency, internal trade and international trade. Internal trade require major conglomerate-owned financial companies and some major independent financial institutions to sell off their shares in non-financial businesses, as these cross-shareholdings could expose the financial system to risk. And international trade, the Japanese government strengthens regulation on the export to South Korea of high-tech chemical used in the semiconductor and smartphone production. Under the new rules, Japanese companies have to apply for approval for each contract to export specific materials to South Korean clients, including Samsung Electronics Corporation.
Cherry Mobile. Cherry Mobile is a Philippine mobile phone and electronics brand by Cosmic Technologies, established by Maynard New in 2009. apart from being the first legal mobile phone brand with dual and triple system in the Philippines that patronizes by many consumers for the first local Android phone that is cheap and affordable for Filipino market.
And last is factor e-mobility, internal trade versus factor mobility, international trade. The examples here are Cherry Mobile versus Samsung. Cherry Mobile started in 2009 as a brand new with only 4 units to showcase, has now taken a full transition to build an ecosystem of innovative products and communication service for the Filipino market. And Samsung is factor mobility international trade. As of 2019, Samsung has its mobile manufacturing factories at 6 locations. Here at Vietnam, China, India, Brazil, Indonesia, and South Korea. 50% of Samsung mobile phones are made in Vietnam and 8% in Korea. The rest is manufactured in India, Brazil, Indonesia, and China.